Passover is not just an ancient story, it is a cry for freedom. What began as a national liberation became universal. At the table, we celebrate the passage from the shadow of slavery to the light of sovereignty. But the texts conceal a secret, the plural term Pesachim, revealing that there is a second Passover. A second chance awaits you.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you for joining us once again on your channel, Mishnah TV. Happy holidays, happy Passover to everyone, and Jag HaMatzot. As is our custom, today we will study the biblical festival we are celebrating this week, popularly known as Pesach. Now, what if I told you that, within the Torah, there exists something that completely shatters the notion that if you failed, you lost, as if there were no other opportunity? Pesach, the festival everyone knows as the Exodus from Egypt, actually conceals a little explored mystery. For the Torah, in certain contexts, does not speak of a single Pesach, but of Pesachim, in the plural, and that is not merely a linguistic detail. It holds within it many profound teachings. It signifies that redemption does not occur just once. It all begins with a problem. A group of men in the desert were unable to celebrate Pesach, not because they didn't want to, but because they were ritually impure. They were outside the system, excluded. And then, they do something unexpected. They approach Moses, and they make a plea. Why must we be left out? That question changes history. For instead of receiving the answer, it is too late, God responds with something radical. There shall be a second Pesach. 1 month later, another opportunity, the same purpose. Pause for a moment and reflect on this. The Torah, which constitutes absolute law, introduces an exception, not because God changes, but because man desired to draw closer. This defies all conventional expectations, for it signifies that distance is not final, that impurity is not permanent, and that the window of time is not closed. Pesach Sheni, as this second Passover is known in Hebrew, is not merely a date on the calendar. It is a principle. The principle that it is never too late. That even if you miss the appointed moment, you can still reclaim the purpose. And here is the most striking revelation of all. The second Passover was not God's idea. It was brought about by man, for those who refused to accept being left out. And God opened a door where none existed before. Now, the question is not historical. It is personal. How many times have you thought you missed your chance? How many times did you assume there was no turning back? The Torah answers with an eternal principle. There is always a second call, a second chance, but only for those who seek it. And that is merely the beginning of what Passover truly signifies, and what you will explore in this class. This is Abel Flores, journalist and founder of Mishnah TV. I'd like to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, to give us a like, and not to forget to visit our website at lemishnah.com. There, you will find a wealth of material on various topics within Judaism and Kabbalah, as well as our free course covering the entire Mishnah, available in 2 formats, chapter by chapter, or through an analysis of each of the summarized treatises. Don't go anywhere. We're starting right now. Let us imagine for a moment that the Torah, that text which weighs every word with almost surgical precision, decides to break with its own apparent simplicity, and instead of saying Pesach, it says Pesachim, in the plural, and then the inevitable question arises, a grammatical error or a theological revelation. For in the Torah, nothing is superfluous, and when something appears to repeat itself or multiply, it is, in reality, delving deeper. The word Pesach generally appears in the singular, as if pointing to a single, central, unrepeatable event. But suddenly, the rabbinic tradition detects those rare occurrences in the plural Pesachim, and that is where the investigation begins, not a philological one, but a spiritual one. First clue, ritual duality. When we say Pesach, what exactly are we talking about? A sacrifice or a festival? The Torah answers, both. On one hand, we have the Korban Pesaj, the paschal sacrifice offered on the 14th of Nisan, a concrete, physical act, almost surgical in its execution, On the other hand, we have Jag HaMatzot, the 7-day festival, with its symbolic, pedagogical, almost philosophical dimension, a single name for two distinct realities. And here, the plural ceases to be strange. It becomes necessary, for Pesach is not merely an event, it is a complex structure with superimposed layers. It is action and memory. It is altar and table. It is lived history and transmitted consciousness. Second clue, the multiplicity of observances. The narrative in Exodus, chapter 12, introduces us to a fascinating scene. There is no single, centralized sacrifice, at least not in its origins. Every family in Israel prepares its own lamb. Every home becomes a sanctuary. Every doorway marked with blood is a microcosm of redemption. There is not just one Pesach. There are thousands. Thousands of simultaneous experiences, all valid, all necessary. An entire nation living through the same event, yet from within the unique, intimate sanctuary of each individual family. The plural form Pesajim, then, is not an abstraction. It is a sociological map of redemption. It teaches us something profoundly modern. Unity does not negate individuality. It elevates it. And now we arrive at the third key, perhaps the most revealing one. The Torah establishes something extraordinary. Two legitimate moments to celebrate Passover. One in Nisan, the original time of the Exodus from Egypt, and another, 1 month later, in Iyar, Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. For those unable to participate in the first, whether due to ritual impurity or distance, the Torah does not say, "You missed it." It says, "You have another chance." And here, the plural attains its deepest dimension. It is not merely a matter of multiple rituals or multiple families. It is a matter of multiple opportunities for redemption. Pesachim signifies that history is not a closed book, that sacred time is not rigid, but compassionate, that even when human beings falter, the divine order makes room for return. And if we think about it closely, this redefines our entire spiritual understanding. For life itself operates in this very way. There is no single moment for change. There is no solitary door of escape from Egypt. There are Pesachim. There are second chances, alternative paths, deferred redemptions. With a simple grammatical variation, the Torah whispers to us a revolutionary idea. Freedom is not a single instant. It is a process. And always, there is more than one way to attain it. There are moments in the Torah when the law does not descend from above, but rather emerges from the human heart. In the second Passover, recounted in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, is one of those extraordinary moments in which halakha is born from a sincere inquiry. The scene is almost intimate. A group of men find themselves in a critical predicament. Having come into contact with a corpse, they are in a state of tamemat, ritual impurity. And this, according to the law, bars them from participating in the Korban Pesaj at its appointed time. But here, something profoundly revolutionary takes place. They do not accept their exclusion in silence. They approach Moses, not in rebellion, but with a blend of anguish and spiritual clarity, impose a question that resonates across generations. Why should we be diminished, excluded, and set apart from presenting the offering of Hashem? Numbers 9:7. Observe the precision of their language. They do not say, "We do not want the law." They say, "We want to belong within it." And then, something almost unheard of occurs. Moses does not answer immediately. He consults. He waits. And the divine response introduces one of the most radical innovations in the entire Torah. There is a second chance. God establishes that those who were unable to celebrate Passover at its appointed time, whether due to ritual impurity or distance, may do so exactly 1 month later, on the 14th of Iyar, what we know today as Pesach Sheni. But it is not a symbolic or diminished version. It retains its essential elements, matzah and maror, memory and bitterness, freedom and process. It is, in essence, the very same Passover, merely shifted in time to include the one who was left out. And here, the Torah reveals to us something that transcends ritual law. It teaches us that exclusion is not a definitive destiny, that the divine system is not designed to punish circumstance, but to redeem it. Pesach Sheni is the celestial response to an honest human question, and that, if we think about it deeply, redefines our relationship with time, with error, and with God. For as long as the capacity exists to ask, "Why am I left out?" there also exists the possibility that heaven will answer, "You are not left out, you simply have not arrived yet." There is an idea that unsettles us, yet, at the same time, offers profound comfort. Not everyone arrives on time. And the Torah, far from ignoring this reality, enshrines it in law. Thus is born the legal framework of Pesach Sheni, not as a marginal exception, but as a structure that reveals the divine psychology. Who has access to this second chance? The Torah, specifically in the book of Numbers, is clear, yet also surprisingly human. First, there are those who were ritually impure during the first Passover. That is to say, people who did not fail morally, they simply found themselves in an unavoidable condition. Second, there are those who were on a direct rachoka, a distant path. And here, the rabbinic tradition opens up a fascinating debate. What does distant truly mean? Physical distance or spiritual distance? And later tradition introduces an even bolder idea. Even negligence can be rectified. That is to say, even one who failed to participate despite having the ability to do so is not condemned forever. The Torah does not romanticize error, but neither does it treat it as absolute. Now, is Pesach Sheni an exact replica of the first Passover? No, and within that difference lies its message. The original Passover, in the month of Nisan, lasts 7 days. It is an immersive, total experience, almost like a complete immersion in sacred time. Pesach Sheni, by contrast, lasts but a single day. It is briefer, more concentrated, almost surgical. During the first Passover, chametz, leavened grain, is absolutely forbidden. It represents a radical break with the past, with the symbolic fermentation of the ego. During the second, the prohibition is not absolute. Chametz is permitted to coexist. Why? Because here, we are not situated in the ideal moment. We are in the midst of the process of return. The Hallel, that expansive hymn of praise, also undergoes a change. It is recited in full during the first Passover, but only partially during the second, as if the joy itself were still under construction. And finally, there is the matter of character. The first Passover is national in scope. It is foundational history. It marks the birth of a people. The second is corrective. It is intimate. It is the story of one who arrived late, yet did not give up on arriving. And here appears the phrase that encapsulates this entire spiritual architecture. Pesach Sheni does not replace the first. It completes it. For life does not always allow us to experience moments in their perfect form. Sometimes we arrive late. Sometimes we are far away. Sometimes, quite simply, we are not ready. But the Torah whispers something to us with an almost therapeutic clarity. What matters is not having arrived on time. What matters is never ceasing to want to arrive. And as long as that desire exists, as long as that inner question persists, the divine calendar, unlike the human one, always reserves a second space, a second Pesach, a second chance, and, perhaps, a more honest version of ourselves. There is a silent assertion within the Torah that, when we listen to it attentively, transforms our entire theology. Not everything begins in heaven. Some things begin in the human heart. The principle of second chances does not originate as an initial decree. It does not appear as a commandment pre-established from the very dawn of creation. It emerges at a specific historical moment, narrated in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, when a group of men refuses to accept spiritual distance as their definitive destiny. And here lies the detail that changes everything. They do not ask for permission to disobey. They ask for a way to belong. Why should we be excluded? That seemingly simple question cleaves a rift in the rigid structure of sacred time, allowing something unexpected to enter, the divine response to human initiative. God had not ordained a second Passover. He institutes it afterward, in response. And this establishes a theological principle of almost disconcerting depth. Divine grace is not always unilateral. Sometimes it is activated by genuine human desire, not by perfection, not by impeccable merit, but by a sincere yearning for closeness. Jewish tradition has intuited this for centuries. The Midrash suggests that there are doors that do not open with keys, but with questions. And this is one of them. Pesach Sheni teaches us that the human being is not a passive recipient in the relationship with the divine. He is an interlocutor, a seeker, indeed, at certain moments, an initiator. And if this is true, and the Torah seems to insist upon it, then spiritual distance is never absolute. For as long as there exists within a person a holy discomfort, a question that gives them no peace, of why am I so far away? The mechanism of return has already been set in motion. Put another way, with the precision the soul demands. God opens paths, yet there are paths that await our desire in order to come into existence. And the second Passover is one of them, not as an exception, but as evidence that, in the dialogue between heaven and earth, human desire also has a voice, and, at times, has the final say in opening a new door. There is a very ancient and profoundly human confusion, the belief that a momentary condition defines who I am forever. The Torah arrives to refute this with an almost therapeutic clarity. In biblical logic, impurity, ***, is neither sin, nor condemnation, nor identity. It is a state. It is a transition. It is a pause in access, not an expulsion from the bond. The person in a state of tame-met, impure due to contact with death, is not rejected by God. They are, quite simply, passing through a condition that limits their participation in certain sacred acts. It limits, but it does not define. And this is where Pesach Sheni bursts forth as a revolutionary declaration. For it introduces into the religious system something that religions often forget: the possibility of returning without bearing an eternal label. Impurity halts you, but it does not describe you. It postpones you, but it does not cancel you. Pesach Sheni breaks with any form of spiritual determinism. It negates the idea that if you are not present at the exact right moment, then you have lost your place forever. And if we reflect on this honestly, this principle speaks not only of ancient rituals, it speaks of life itself. How often does a person define themselves by their worst moment? How often do we confuse a passing phase with a permanent identity? The Torah answers with a forceful elegance. That is a mistake. For in the profound language of the soul, no one is their impurity. One may be distant without being an outsider. One may be halted without being lost. And as long as the possibility of a second moment exists, as it does in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, then one's personal story is never truly closed. Pesach Sheni teaches us something we ought to repeat to ourselves more often. You are not what happened to you. You are what you do afterward. And in that afterward, there is always, always, an open door. There is a phrase in the Jewish tradition that, if taken seriously, disarms one of our most deeply ingrained beliefs, the idea that there is a point of no return. In Hebrew, it is said, **ein davar avad,** nothing is lost. It is not poetry. It is spiritual legislation. For when we arrive at the episode of the second Passover in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, we discover something that defies our linear logic of time. God introduces into the Torah a concrete mechanism for correcting the past. Think about it carefully. It is not merely about comforting the one who failed. It is about reopening the calendar, about declaring that a moment which seemed closed off can come into existence once again under new conditions. That is radical, for in our human experience, time is often relentless. What you failed to do yesterday seems lost forever. Opportunities pass, doors close, and we learn to live with that silent sensation of having arrived too late. But the Torah, with an almost subversive audacity, posits another possibility. There is no such thing as too late, so long as the desire to return remains. Pesach Sheni does not erase the past. It does not rewrite history, but it creates a space where the past can be confronted, integrated, and, in a certain sense, redeemed. It is as if time itself were granted a second dimension. And here emerges a teaching that transcends the ritual. Life is not defined by the moments you lost, but by your willingness to reclaim them in a different way. *ein davar avad. Nothing is lost, so long as you do not give up on seeking it. For in the universe of the Torah, failure is not the end. It is, at times, the precise point where a more honest way of approaching the sacred begins. And perhaps, if we listen deeply enough, this phrase describes not merely an ancient law. It describes a living promise. That even now, even here, it is not yet too late. There is an idea we often overlook when reading about the Exodus from Egypt. We believe it was a single event, when, in reality, it is a process. Redemption did not occur just once. It began there, and ever since, it is reactivated in every generation, in every personal story, in every moment when someone decides to step out of their own limitations. Pesach Sheni comes to teach us precisely that redemption is not bound to a single perfect instant on the calendar, that it does not depend exclusively on having been there when it all happened for the first time. Rather, it can be reactivated. Yes, reactivated, like a flame that does not go out, but merely waits. For in the account found in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, the Torah introduces something extraordinary, the possibility of restoring one's relationship with God, even outside of the ideal time. And this shatters a dangerous illusion. The illusion that there exists only one right moment to change, to draw closer, to begin. Pesach Sheni tells us, no, the ideal time is important, but it is not absolute. There is something deeper than the calendar, the inner movement of the soul. And when that movement emerges, when a person awakens, questions, and desires to return, then even an imperfect time can become sacred. Redemption, then, ceases to be merely a historical memory. It becomes a living dynamic. It is not merely what happened to a people thousands of years ago. It is what can happen to you today. For leaving Egypt is not simply a matter of crossing a sea. It is stepping out of a mindset, out of a fear, out of a limited version of oneself. And if you did not do it yesterday, you can do it today. And if you do not do it today, the Torah whispers to you with infinite patience, there will be another moment, another door, another Pesach. For true redemption is not instantaneous. It is progressive, and above all, always possible. And now we can return to the initial question, that small anomaly which, in reality, concealed a revolution. Why does the Torah say Pesajim? Because sometimes what appears to be a mere grammatical detail is, in truth, a profound statement regarding the very nature of God. The plural form is no accident. It is a revelation. It tells us, with brilliant subtlety, that redemption does not possess a single gate of entry, that there is no solitary, valid instant, no single, unrepeatable moment in which everything is irrevocably decided. There is more than one path to redemption. There is more than one legitimate moment to encounter God. There is more than one opportunity. That is Pesachim. And when we grasp this, Passover ceases to be merely a historical memory. It is no longer solely the recollection of an ancient liberation recounted in the book of Exodus. It transforms into something far more audacious, an open system of restoration. A spiritual mechanism that is not exhausted by the past, but rather projects itself constantly into the present. Pesach Sheni, then, is not a mere footnote in the law. It is its ethical culmination. It is the divine institutionalization of the second chance, not as a concession, but as a fundamental principle. And here, the Torah articulates, perhaps, one of its most radical concepts. The relationship with God is not severed by a single, isolated error. It is deferred. It is suspended. It is placed on pause until the human being chooses to return. And at that very moment, neither sooner nor later, the path opens once again. For the plural form, Pesachim, speaks of far more than just calendars or rituals. It speaks of something far more intimate, of all the times a person believed it was too late, only to discover that it was not, of all the doors that appeared to be shut, until someone decided to knock upon them once more. And perhaps that is the most profound teaching of all. God does not dwell solely within the perfect moment. He dwells, too, in the return. This has been Abel Flores, founder of Mishnah TV. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Remember to subscribe, give us a like, and visit us at our website, lemishnah.com, where you will find articles and features on Second Temple Judaism, Kabbalah, and our free Mishnah course. Here are a couple of videos to help you continue studying with us. Shalom.